I'm so happy to be here. So happy to see some old friends, some folks that I haven't seen in a long time. I'm trying to remember. So you can catch me in this lie. You can tell me there's a lie later. But I think this might be the first platform I've physically done at another society outside of Philadelphia since the pandemic. I'm really trying. I think it's true. I think it's true in person. So thanks for having me. uh, Today it was interesting, and I think because of there's sort of a nervous energy and a sort of uh, uh, the idea I've been thinking about this platform not just for this day, but I've first thought about this a year ago. I was supposed to do a platform in February on love with the Riverdale Yonkers Society for Ethical Culture. Um, all right, so I worked at Riverdale, so that doesn't count for a year. Okay, so that I was like, okay, cool, um, and the topic was love, and I didn't want to talk about love. Had gone through recently a breakup. I didn't want to talk about romantic love, and so I decided I wanted to talk about this concept that had been just sort of spinning in my brain, kind of around revolutionary love. I wanted to think about certain relationships in my life that felt giving and felt whole and lively and a ways that other relationships that I had in my life, such as romantic and family, didn't. And I was trying to figure out. I really wanted to have the platform to really, or to use the platform as a opportunity to think about why that was the case. And so y'all are going to suffer with me to figure out why that was the case. Um, but kind of for me, this is a perfect place to talk about this because I look at ethical culture, and excuse my, kind of use of words, but for better or worse, a religion of relationships. That the spiritual tool in ethical culture is connection. Right? So our kind of sort of call to elicit the best in others as to elicit the best in yourself, right, requires connection. It requires bridging this gap between one person and another and doing deep work. And so I felt, so in some ways I feel my sort of struggles in relationships can feel a little bit confusing to me because I'm like, I've read so much Felix Adler, right? I should know what to do. Funny people in here. I like that. I should know what to do. And I was just I always come back to this metaphor that Felix Adler uses to describe. He says people should be painting these spiritual images of the other. Right? It should be like, all right, this person, if you're a lawyer, right, that the spiritual image of the lawyer is the lawyer is using their skills to moderate and then and pursue justice. And if you're a doctor, that spiritual image of that doctor is using their skills to create healthy people as much as they can without concern about access, right? So imagining kind of the best of a person, and then through relationship, that person is able to see that spirit, sort of that reflection in the other person from what they think of, like, this is who I see in you, this is the potential I see in you, and that they become pulled towards it. Right? That's how ethical culture is supposed to work. But this quote from Hanif Abdurraqib, who's a wonderful writer and poet who just released a book that is a reflection on basketball and grief and just kind of everything, but through the prism of basketball. He had this quote in an interview. He said, I think sometimes, even in love, even in our desire to love someone in a very big way, we are perhaps rushing to love the imagined person. Sometimes, in my rush to love someone, I can see myself rushing past the actual person and trying to love the imagined person because the imagined person is a little bit easier to love. It's like, oh, that's good. That feels pretty accurate. That's I could say. I could see that at work in some of these difficult relationships. Um, and so I've been ruminating with that quote and thinking, well, like, what what is the alternative, right? If Felix Adler has led me astray with these spiritual images, and I've led myself astray with my own love of potential, right? Right? Then what else is there? And so I began to think about some relationships that I have with people, and I said I want to interview you because I want to ask you some questions because I have this feeling that certain relationships that that aren't there aren't ties because of attraction, they aren't romantic, they aren't ties simply because of proximity or similarity, they aren't ties because of inherited bonds, blood bonds, or decreed bonds. They're just they just are existing and kind of floating and growing on their own. And they all seem to revolve around our common kind of uh, search for liberation. And however that kind of might look for each relationship that I have. So I don't want to overwhelm you with characters, these characters being my friends, right? So I'm just trying to give you just like, I try to keep it low to 4, and I try to keep these interviews around 40 minutes also because I don't want to pay for Zoom. We're not, we're not at that part of the pandemic anymore. So I'll kind of give you kind of a brief description of each of these people and my relationship to them, and then kind of share some of the insights from these conversations. Um, so first person is Sierra Verchilo, who I met in Ghana. And we were both outsiders in Ghana, in northern Ghana. Uh, Sierra was doing research around indigenous food systems. I was working with a NGO that was working to sort of prevent and also support women who were accused of witchcraft. And so we were both kind of outsiders, but we were also different from each other. Sierra is a white Canadian woman. I'm a Black American man. But something about how we both sought to be in Ghana and what Ghana brought out of us kind of brought us closer together. And so we had a chance meeting and we stayed in touch. And I say over the last, probably since I met her 8 years ago, I've seen Sierra in person maybe 3 times. But we, on social media and on WhatsApp, sometimes have these exchanges about our approach to figuring out how to be in relationship with a place that's far away. Sierra's work still focuses on Ghana, her relationships, and her sort of almost drive to direct resources to support the protection of indigenous recipes, indigenous foods, right? It's kept her in constant communication. Me, I've sought to constantly figure out how do I maintain a relationship with Ghana outside of the non-governmental NGO sort of industrial complex, right? And so with a project that I was starting, I sort of raised money for cameras 2 years ago, and my interest in photography and documentary, and my connection with many sort of young people in Ghana, we sort of worked to this idea of what would it be like to support Ghanaian photographers, videographers in pursuing the things that they wanted to do and tell their own stories, right? So to take sort of out of the center of me doing the work or doing the photography, doing the things, but actually giving folks the tools to tell their own stories. And I feel like Sierra was the perfect complement to kind of explore the possibilities of this work, because I felt it was very similar to what she was doing, trying to center the voice of the folks who knew about the place they were in, and maintain those and make those knowledge systems sustainable. And then there's Crescent, which I don't know if this is true for everyone, but when you're in your early 20s and you move to a new place and you walk by a really attractive person, you tend to have a crush on, or you might develop a little crush. And if you live in Philadelphia and there are porches and you say hello, right? That's how me and Crescent's relationship started. Person, me interested, Crescent not so much. Cool. We continued. But over the years, we developed a correspondence and actual relationship where, divorced from my original, like, oh, wonderful person, adorable person, to like, oh, this is a person I can think with and exchange with. Crescent is a philosopher, artist, dreamer, amazing food critic. And our relationship I remember our relationship really developed when I was in the midst of doing leadership training and really struggling to articulate how I thought some of the work that I had done in Africana studies, or the people I had read, how Toni Morrison, how Chinua Achebe, all these different people were articulating, these Black authors were articulating humanist ideas, but struggling for a way to bridge that gap between the sort of traditional Western philosophers I was assigned. So I said, am I weird here for thinking in Sula there's some existentialism going on, right? Or in Beloved, that this seems like a kind of fundamental humanist text, right, about what does one do with freedom, and the question of how to love, right, after being essentially not allowed to love. So Crescent was the person who, in generosity, helped me answer these questions and explore. Chris Rogers is what I would call an artist in community, a community artist. And I used to say this, and I was like, I think I feel like a community artist. People are like, what are you talking about? And what Chris does really well is bring people together for the purposes of expanding, exploring community, and learning and engaging in topics around social justice. And Chris and I have worked together as I have tried to expand my documentary practice from events to his wedding to now his attempt to preserve the house of Henry Ossawa Tanner. Henry Ossawa Tanner was one of the first Black master painter, and he lived in Philadelphia, and his house is in kind of disrepair, and Chris is a part of this effort to rebuild the house and make it a kind of community space. The first place Chris did that work, or that I came to know Chris when I came to know he was doing this work, was at the Paul Robeson house, which Paul Robeson also lived in Philadelphia as he was ending towards the end of his life. And that space was very similar, where the house was in disrepair and they were trying to buy the mortgage, and then they had built this kind of community center. And I felt like it was the other pillar to ethical culture for me. It was the place where I got to really explore my Pan-Africanism, my connection to West Philadelphia, right? And alongside with the Philadelphia Ethical Society, where I got to explore my humanism. And then there's Amber Rose Johnson slash person. And Amber Rose was my, is in some way still my kettlebell coach. But not just my kettlebell coach, exercise, weightlifting. So for me, kettlebells were this, how do I say, uh, very challenging. I hated them, right? It was a very challenging way to lift weights. I was used to working out in a certain kind of very prescribed way. You lift a heavy weight 5 times and you put it down, and then you try to do that 4 more times. That was my whole approach to weightlifting. With kettlebells, there's timed limits and different moves and succinction, and you need like good conditioning. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. But in that essence, it was also that invitation to try something new, to fail, and in trusting her guidance, her approach, it kind of gave me a new way of being able to treat my body well. And that for that, I'm in, just in debt. But her as a person, her approach to fitness is much like aligned with her approach to thought and her approach to care, which is like just supreme intention, supreme thoughtfulness. And these are the folks that I kind of went to say, what does revolutionary love mean to you? And they gave kind of these very different answers, right? So I was expecting kind of, maybe a reflection of maybe what I thought, which is that kind of that love in a revolutionary sense centers liberation, that folks are kind of, the work that they're doing binds them and offers them space to grow in a way that's different than other kinds of relationships. But folks, they went further, right? Crescent said to me, revolutionary love is about reconciling difference, or a rejection of love that is about completion or reflection. The other, thinking of the other as a radically different person, foreign, while at the same time close and like me, right? The other becomes not a threat, but an acceptance of how we are also alike, and leads us to be caretakers of another's selfhood, capacity, and worth. And so what I gathered from that, this kind of love pushes us to build our capacity, not to assume knowledge, but to focus on the skill of listening to gain it, listening to others, seeing the other. Sierra, it's like revolutionary love are relationships that we're listening, so there's some threads, right? Listening closely, truly what that person wants and needs without the constraints that they are working under or working towards, the liberation of those constraints, so that they are more in line with the goals and the virtues that they want to see. When you're able to be loved in this revolutionary way, free from these norms, it's empowering. It frees up what is possible. And Chris goes, revolutionary love is that love that makes us aware of ourselves and our connection to one another in ways that feel manageable but stretchy. It starts with the self, your own revolutionary practice, which is formed by the people in your life and the cultural context, the cultural text that you're engaging with, which would hopefully help you grow in the capacity to relate to others. And Amber Rose goes, revolutionary love is a moving horizon. It is ever-changing. You cannot arrive there. It is a love that wants to escape all parts of harm and enclosure. Love and revolution also can't be separated. They are like intimately connected. I don't know what revolution is without love, and I don't know what love is without revolution. It's like the pursuit of freedom, and the love is the action part behind it. She likened it to praxis, where praxis being thought and action together, or action that is working out the thought. So similar. So in these kind of like conversations were actually really helpful for me, because one, I got to hear these kind of different ways that I had impacted these people that I care about. Sierra says that I helped her come up with her handle for Instagram, which is in a voice message where I mentioned the importance of finding life-giving work. And she's like, oh, for my brand, I'm gonna call it Food Giving Life, right? And so that was something I never knew. And I think about Crescent, who's like, Crescent offers this really generous thing. And she says, in this way that, we have become close, in some ways closer than, with her partner, and, vice versa for me, in that we are traversing over this difference, and it's sort of almost like feels like an intentional feminist context, like a feminist approach. It's a reciprocity of care. And so even there's times when we struggle with each other, and because when I was having a difficult moment 2 years ago, I had just come back from Ghana, I was stressed, I wasn't working, I was abroad, so I had to pay back the things I owed while I was abroad. And I couldn't figure that out. I was like, Crescent had lost someone, I couldn't be in touch, and we kind of had a falling out over that. And I realized that in a way, the accountability that showed me that my difficulty in showing up was not about whether I could, financially give, or whether I could be in presence, but whether I was able to share, to continue that correspondence, because that was our expectation for each other. So as we've kind of mended that bridge, we've continued that correspondence. So I want to invite you all to think about someone that has shifted you, someone that makes you feel cared for, feel heard, right? And feel expansive. One of the things I liken to these relationships are, I think of them like gardens, where I throw seeds without any understanding of where they might grow. And over time, if I water, come back, water, care, that something begins to take root. I don't know what exactly that will be. I don't know how it will go. There are no rows. There are no planned visions of what that will look like. But there's a faith that something will happen, and that continuation of that care makes it so. So I want to invite you to think about that person that feels like their relationship feels like a garden. And maybe some images that y'all have together. And you're going to receive a poem, because I think important part of when I come to the platform is that we have a deliverable. Sorry if that's not something you want to hear on a Sunday morning. But I want to invite you for an exercise. So it is April, which could mean a lot of things. It is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, right? Having conversations around consent. But it is also the month of poetry. And I observe this in different ways. If you're my Facebook friend, sometimes you get flooded with daily poems. It's been a long time since that happened, but it happened. And, I also like to try to have exercises or sharing of poems within community. Because, sometimes we don't get enough time to sit with some poems. So on the paper, some poems about friendship. Should go through those poems, read them, take them in, think about that person you were thinking about. And I want you to choose some favorite lines that are like your relationship, that harken to that relationship. And I want you to put those lines together. So you can choose a word, you can choose a part of a line, from each of the poems. And just at that blank piece of paper, collect those lines together and see what comes out. Okay? So, um, thank you for bearing me. And I'm going to share, and I'm going to say, because it's true, it's dedicated to Zia, who we met at the Philadelphia Ethical Society, I don't know, 10 years ago? Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Walking with you into acceptable society. And now we have a choice: repair a world or build a new one inside our bodies, our endless longings, wild until we are free. Evening shall not go out, but not all of us. Mercy or nothing is enough. Keep on moving till we found we. I want you happy. I want you warm. Thank y'all. Have a good day.